Welcome to the deep dive. Okay, imagine this scenario. You're facing a tricky problem. Could be, I don't know, a health thing that's bothering you, or maybe a tough call you need to make at work. What's the very first thing you actually do?
Right. Most people probably think, okay, pros and cons list, make the logical choice.
Exactly. We like to think we're independent, rational decision makers. But what if that's really only like half the story?
hmm What if the way we genuinely seek help is much more tangled up with our social world than we usually admit?
Yes. That popular idea often misses a huge piece of the puzzle. We see ourselves as these isolated, perfectly rational agents.
But human action is almost always fundamentally social. It just is.
Right. So today on the deep dive, we're going way beyond that simple picture of the, isolated, rational person.
Our mission today is to unpack a really foundational sociological framework. It's called the Social Organization Strategy, or SOS for short.
And you're going to see how it dramatically shifts how we understand decision-making, especially when it comes to seeking help. You'll discover some, honestly, surprising patterns in how people actually get support.
And what really drives those choices? Well, it goes far beyond simple logic.
To do this, we're digging into a really influential academic paper from 1992 by Bernice Pescosolido. It's called Beyond Rational Choice: The Social Dynamics of How People Seek Help.
Yeah, it's a classic. And it uses real-world data from a study on how people seek medical care, which makes these somewhat abstract ideas feel very concrete.
Okay, so let's get into it. Maybe we should start with the view that's often dominant, this idea of rational choice theory, or RCT.
Good place to start, yeah. RCT, in its sort of classical form, sees individuals as purposive actors.
Meaning they're deliberate, they think things through.
Exactly. They're seen as carefully, mulling over the costs and benefits of different actions in whatever situation they're in.
And the picture that paints, as the paper points out, is of the individual as an egoistic, rational utility maximizer.
Mm-hmm. Sounds a bit cold, maybe, but you can see the appeal.
Totally. It's elegant, it's simple, and honestly, it feels kind of right, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Especially in modern societies where we really value individual agency, weighing pros and cons.
It aligns with that common sense view. One author calls it the common sense psychology most of us use without even thinking about it.
It just clicks.
Yeah.
But, and here's the big but, right?
Here's where it gets really interesting, yeah, and where sociology comes in and says, hang on a minute.
So the core argument from Pescosolido's paper is that while RCT has its uses, it fails to capture essential features of social life. It sort of strips individuals out of society.
That's a great way to put it. It isolates them.
But if it's so limited, why has it been such a dominant way of thinking for so long?
That's a fair question. I think part of it is that elegance, that simplicity we mentioned. It offers a neat model.
But simplicity comes at a cost.
That's what sociologists argue. They have 5 specific quarrels with using RCT as a kind of universal theory for all action.
Okay, let's break those down. What's the first one?
First is the unit of analysis. RCT focuses laser-like on the individual's internal calculation, their mental math.
Right.
But sociologists ask, is that the most meaningful unit? Or should we be looking at the individual in interaction and the structure of those interactions? RTT. Well, it struggles with that.
Yeah, it's like we're all playing chess alone in our heads. Okay, what's quarrel number 2?
The second is the pivotal process. By treating social stuff as just, like, external factors, RCT basically ditches social interaction as the actual mechanism through which things happen, decisions included.
So it keeps things atomized,
Yeah.
even when people are clearly talking and influencing each other.
Precisely. It preserves atomized decision-making. Third point is embeddedness. This is a big one.
Okay.
Rational choice tends to ignore how problems and the solutions we find are deeply embedded in our social networks.
Can you give an example?
Sure. Think about a common headache. You don't just sit there calculating drug efficacy versus cost in a vacuum, right?
No, probably not. I might ask my partner if we have any painkillers, or text a friend who gets migraines.
Exactly. And that act of consulting your network isn't just gathering external data points for your rational calculation. It's part of the solution-finding process itself.
I see. The consultation is an action.
Yes. And problems often aren't just a hit to you. They're frequently a shock to a network, sending ripples through your social circle.
Like that phrase, shock to a network. It makes it feel more dynamic. It's not just my problem anymore.
Mm-hmm. Suddenly your family, your friends, they're kind of drawn into managing it with you, maybe without even consciously deciding to.
Okay, that covers embeddedness. What's the fourth quarrel?
Fourth is about dynamic processes. RCT often zooms in on a single discrete choice, like it plucks one moment at a time.
Instead of seeing the bigger picture.
Exactly. It overlooks the larger event or the sequence of events that actually lead up to needing to act. Life isn't just isolated decision points. It's an unfolding stream, patterned, contingent, always emerging.
And the fifth and final quarrel.
This one's about the scope of action. RCT, because it loves conscious cost-benefit thinking, tends to ignore a huge range of human actions that aren't really economic or deliberately calculated in that way.
Like what? Habits.
Exactly. Cultural routines, habits, these things form the bedrock of so much of our day-to-day life. And we often do them without a second thought, not because we weighed the pros and cons 5 seconds ago.
Right. We just do them. Okay, so RCT has these significant limitations when we try to apply it broadly, especially to social behavior. What's the alternative then? This brings us to the social organization strategy, the SOS framework.
Right, and SOS is presented not as a replacement exactly, but as a different but complementary orienting framework. It's another lens.
Not throwing out RCT entirely, but adding a crucial social dimension.
Precisely. And its core principles are really different. It's explicitly social network-centered and event-centered.
So it starts from sociological basics, like the idea that social interaction is primary. It's the essence of social life.
Yes. It argues that our social networks provide the mechanism, the actual pathway through which we learn about difficulties, figure them out, and try to handle them.
You don't just calculate in your head. You talk, you watch, you consult people.
And this SOS framework rests on 4 key building blocks. First, it sees the actor differently. Not the isolated, ever-consciously rational person,
Right.
but a social and pragmatic actor. People are seen as knowledgeable, skillful actors who have practical consciousness.
Practical consciousness, what does that mean?
It means we're smart, we can improvise, adapt, but we also rely heavily on routines, habits, things we've learned work through interaction. We're not calculating every single step.
So capable and socially conditioned. Makes sense. What's the second building block?
Second, the focus shifts to patterned interaction. It's not just about the individual anymore, it's about the individual in patterned interaction with others. Social life is seen as these dynamic streams of action. It's the dance between people.
Okay. And if interaction is key, then the third block follows logically.
It does. Third, the proper unit of analysis becomes the social network itself. The paper says interactional events replace individuals, social networks replace social atoms.
Wow. So it's not just what you do, but what your network does and how that whole system shapes your path.
Exactly. And fourth, finally, is how it views context. Macro things like time and place aren't just passive backdrops.
They're active.
In the SOS view, they represent different substantive and structural networks tied to individuals and their boundaries. Think about it. Someone in a tight-knit rural town versus someone in a huge anonymous city.
They'd likely have different go-to networks for advice, right?
Yeah.
Family versus maybe online groups or colleagues.
Exactly. Their place shapes the network structure available to them, which in turn shapes their strategies for getting help. It's not just background, it's integral.
That really reframes context. Okay, so we have these 4 building blocks. What actually drives action within this SOS framework? What's the engine?
Well, SOS focuses on how real, concrete problems get dealt with in that ongoing stream of social life. It looks at the dynamics that operate in interaction, the role of network structure, network content.
And it's not just about rationality.
No, definitely not. Action is seen as driven by a mix of both effect and rationality, emotion and cognition. And crucially, these are understood as intrinsically social, not purely individual things.
So habits, like trusting certain people in your network, get built into your routine without constant calculation.
That's a big part of it. You rely on ties that have proven effective, often without consciously weighing alternatives every time.
Okay, this is fascinating, theoretically.
Yeah.
Now, let's make it really concrete. How does SOS play out in the real world? The paper uses medical help-seeking as a case study.
Yeah, and it's a great choice. Medical care has this rich multidisciplinary history. Sociology, anthropology, economics have all looked at it.
And things have changed, right? Like the rise of chronic illness must complicate purely individual models.
Absolutely. It highlights the limits of seeing health decisions as just one person making one choice. Plus, health is maybe less inherently biased toward a purely rational choice view than, say, buying stocks.
So what were the traditional ways of looking at medical choices? You mentioned models like the health belief model.
Right. Those and others, like the socio-behavioral model, often had what the paper calls a medical model bias. They focused on one decision.
Mhm.
Will this person use a modern medical professional, a doctor, a hospital?
And they saw the patient as a singular, insular individual making that choice.
Pretty much. But medical sociology started pushing back with this idea of the illness career,
An illness career.
like a journey.
Exactly. Seeing help-seeking not as one choice, but as a sequence of actions people take trying to fix a health problem. This opened things up.
And revealed a much wider range of choices people actually use, didn't it? Beyond just the doctor.
Totally. People talk to family, friends, coworkers, clergy. They might see alternative healers, chiropractors, homeopaths. There's self-care, over-the-counter drugs, home remedies. The list goes on. It's like when my friend was looking for a specialist. It wasn't just one database search. It was asking her GP, calling her aunt, who's a nurse, checking online reviews, talking to a colleague, a whole process.
That's a perfect illustration. The key shift in thinking was moving from seeing these options as just competing with each other.
Like doctor versus chiropractor.
Right, to seeing their complementarity. People often use multiple sources, sometimes at the same time, sometimes one after the other, throughout these illness events or episodes. It's dynamic.
Okay. And this perspective led to some key insights that really bolster the SOS framework, right? There were four main ones.
Yeah, 4 key contributions from medical sociology. First, the idea that the most obvious choice, like formal medical care, doesn't actually capture the full reality of the medical marketplace or how lay people decide.
People do more than just go to the doctor.
Second, people usually don't make just one planned choice and stick to it. They continue to ask advice and seek help from a wide variety of sources until the problem is solved, or maybe they just feel they've exhausted options.
It's an ongoing process, not a single decision point.
Third, illness triggers a dynamic social process of coping. People in your network aren't just influences on your decision, they become active caregivers and advisors. They form part of what the paper calls a therapy managing group.
Your support system actively helps manage the situation.
Exactly. And fourth, even the medical care system itself can be seen as a dynamic network of interaction. Think about referrals, consultations, advice flowing between different people and places.
So putting it all together, the SOS approach changes the focus from a single decision to an episode of action.
Yes. And within that episode, the patterns, the combinations, the sequences of choices, what the paper calls strategies, those become the main thing we need to explain.
It's about the whole journey, the pathway people take.
Exactly. And this is where Pescosolido's data analysis really shines. She used data from a big national survey back in the mid-70s, the National Survey of Access to Medical Care, specifically to compare what RCT and SOS could tell us.
Okay, so under the old RCT lens, what question would the data be used to answer?
The standard question would be, who is most likely to use a physician, and under what conditions? Simple binary. Physician use versus non-use. Everything else gets lumped together.
Very limited.
Very. But using the SOS framework, the question becomes fundamentally different. Is there, in fact, a discernible set of patterns, combinations of options, or strategies that individuals use during an illness episode? And if so, are these patterns socially organized?
How did they find these patterns?
They used a statistical technique, clustering, to see if distinct patterns or combinations of choices emerged from the data.
And this is where we get the big reveal, right? The aha moment.
This is it. Because the analysis didn't just show physician versus non-physician, it uncovered 8 distinct strategies, these unique pathways or histories that people followed during severe illness episodes.
8 different ways. Okay, let's hear them.
All right, first, physician alone, just the doctor. This was about a quarter of people, 25.2%. The classic self-referral. Second, family alone, relying only on family. Much smaller group, 5.5%. Third, doing nothing, about 3.5%.
Interesting, too.
Fourth, and this was the big one, family plus physicians, used by 42.2%, by far the most common strategy.
Wow, nearly half. So family is key even when seeing a doctor.
Absolutely. Then fifth, family plus physicians plus non-prescription drugs, about 5.4%.
Layering on self-treatment.
Sixth, family plus physicians plus home remedies, similar size, 5.9%.
Okay.
Seventh, family plus physicians plus coworkers, classmates, also around 5.7%, bringing in the work or school network.
And the last one.
Eighth, Friends plus physicians, this was 6.4%. And notably, this is where friends are involved, but family is not part of that specific therapy group.
That's fascinating. So yeah, physician use is common for severe illness, obviously.
Yeah.
But the huge takeaway is that the people who do see a physician are getting there through very different routes.
Exactly. Their pathways are not the same, and crucially, the social process that leads them to consult a physician are not the same.
And what was it, 75% use strategies involving more than just the physician?
That's right. A huge majority use these more complex, pluralistic strategies. It really hammers home the need for a richer model than just RCT's simple binary.
So the next logical question is, who uses which strategy? How are these pathways socially organized?
Precisely. And this is where comparing the RCT and SOS findings gets really telling.
Okay, so when they analyze the data, using the traditional RCT approach, just looking at physician use versus non-use, what popped out?
Honestly, not much beyond the obvious. Only illness characteristics, like how severe or chronic the illness was, really predicted physician use significantly.
And social factors, like race, age, education.
According to that simple RCT model, they were largely insignificant, dismissed, which would lead you to conclude it's a purely rationally based decision-making process, driven almost entirely by medical need.
That changed dramatically when they looked at the strategies using the SOS framework.
Night and day. The study found, and I'm quoting loosely here, that overall social contingency variables are associated significantly with strategies. And importantly, they distinguish among strategies in which physicians are sought.
So social factors do matter, significantly, but they matter in determining the pathway or strategy someone uses, not just the simple yes-no of seeing a doctor.
Exactly. Social factors shape how you navigate the help-seeking process.
This is huge. Let's get specific. How did things like race or age influence the strategy chosen?
Okay, so for race, the study found Black individuals were more likely than others to use either the physician-only strategy or the strategy involving physicians plus friends. But they were less likely to use the strategy combining physicians, family, and non-prescription drugs.
Suggesting different network reliance or maybe different access pathways.
Plausibly, yes. It points to distinct social patterns in navigating care. Now for age, older people were more likely to use strategies that included non-prescription drugs alongside family and physicians, or sometimes just relying on family alone.
Makes sense. Maybe more traditional reliance on home care and family networks.
Could be. They were also more likely to use those pluralist strategies involving friends or coworkers, too. It suggests a broader reliance on established social ties.
What about socioeconomic factors like education?
Higher education of the head of household was linked to being more likely to use non-prescription drugs or home remedies in combination with family and physicians, less likely to bring coworkers into the mix.
Different resources, perhaps different networks emphasized.
Yeah.
Okay, marital status must have had an effect.
Oh, definitely. Married individuals leaned heavily on family in their strategies, whether family alone or family plus physicians, or family plus physicians plus non-prescription drugs. And they were much less likely to involve friends or coworkers.
The spouse and immediate family become the core therapy managing group.
Seems so. Now, work status. People who were working were more likely to include coworkers or friends in their strategies. Makes sense, right? The workplace is an immediate social network.
Yeah, readily available advisors or support. And they were less likely to do nothing.
Correct. Being employed seemed to correlate with taking some kind of action involving others.
Did attitudes play a role? Like, what if someone was skeptical of doctors?
Good question. Yes. People who reported more skepticism of physicians were more likely to use non-prescription drugs with family and physicians, or basically any strategy other than just relying solely on family or solely on physicians.
So their skepticism pushed them towards more diverse, pluralistic strategies, not necessarily away from physicians altogether, but adding other layers.
That's what the pattern suggests. It shapes the type of help sought.
And finally, location. Did living in a big city versus a small town matter?
It did. People in larger places were less likely to do nothing or to consult only family. They were more likely to widen their circle, bringing in friends, coworkers, using home remedies more often in combination strategies.
Suggesting maybe denser, more diverse networks offer more varied options in urban settings?
That's a reasonable interpretation. Different network structures foster different strategic possibilities.
So the bottom line here is pretty clear. Social factors, which looked unimportant through the narrow lens of RCT, are actually crucial. They affect pathways to care.
They absolutely do. They differentiate how people seek help, even when the endpoint, like seeing a physician, might look the same on the surface.
The SOS framework, by looking at these strategies, gives us a much more refined understanding of the role of social factors in how we cope with illness and seek help.
It moves us way beyond that simplistic, isolated individual making a cold calculation.
Well, this has been a really fascinating deep dive.
Mhm.
We've seen how the standard way we think about decisions, that rational choice model, often misses the huge, sometimes invisible influence of our social world, our
Mhm.
connections, the way events unfold.
The social organization strategy framework really shows that our choices, even for something as personal as health, aren't just these neat individual calculations. They are socially organized into these distinct embedded strategies.
And that data from the 70s survey really brought it home, seeing those 8 core strategies, most involving multiple sources of help.
And understanding how social factors, race, age, marital status, where you live shape which strategy you're likely to use, it's about network opportunities and social contingencies.
So here's something to think about next time you're facing a problem, or you see someone else trying to navigate one. What therapy managing group are they actually activating? Who are they turning to?
And how might their specific social networks, their past experiences, maybe their cultural routines be shaping that whole illness career, that pathway they're taking?
It's likely far more complex and far more social than just a simple cost-benefit analysis would ever reveal. The answers might really surprise you.